The room was small, just a town hall that had seen better days. Wooden chairs were lined up in rows, many of them creaking under the weight of people who had come for the talent show. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting uneven shadows on the walls decorated with faded banners that read Annual Talent Night. There was a hum of chatter, laughter, and the occasional groan from someone who had been waiting too long. Among the crowd, there was a girl who sat quietly, barely noticeable. She had come alone and had kept to herself, sitting near the back with her bag tightly held against her chest. People around her whispered, sometimes glancing at her, sometimes not. Some wondered why she even came. She didn't wear flashy clothes, she didn't have extravagant makeup, and she carried no instrument or props like the others. It seemed to some that she didn't belong. A few of the volunteers organizing the event barely even recognized her name on the participant list. They assumed she would be nervous, that she might stumble or forget her lines. There were murmurs that perhaps she had come to waste everyone's time. The audience, meanwhile, leaned back in their seats, chatting among themselves, expecting nothing extraordinary from the quiet girl, who seemed so ordinary. She watched the other participants as they practiced on stage. There was a young boy juggling, a teenager playing the piano with practiced fingers, and a pair of dancers spinning and twirling in perfect synchrony. Everyone seemed confident, and she felt a small pang of anxiety, though she tried to push it down. She reminded herself why she was there. She had worked hard to get to this point, even if no one else could see it. Her hands fidgeted slightly, the sound of her fingers brushing together, breaking the quiet moment she had claimed for herself. The air smelled faintly of popcorn, old wood, and cleaning detergent, a combination that somehow felt comforting and familiar. The girl thought about the road that had led her here. Life had not been easy. She had faced more doubt than encouragement, more rejection than praise. Teachers had overlooked her. Friends had drifted away, and even family members had doubted her abilities. But she had never stopped dreaming. Each time someone told her she couldn't, she quietly prepared to prove them wrong in her own way. This performance was not just another chance. It was a statement. It was a way to show that all those years of silent perseverance had not been wasted. And though her heart raced with nervous energy, she felt a deep, steady determination. She noticed a few people glancing her way, curious or skeptical. Some had already made up their minds that she wouldn't impress anyone. A woman whispered to her friend, "She doesn't look like she belongs on stage." "I bet she's going to freeze," another person muttered under their breath. Why did she even sign up? The words stung, but she didn't let them show. Instead, she took a slow, steadying breath, letting the tension ease out of her shoulders. She focused on the small notebook in her lap. A notebook filled with countless hours of practice, thoughts, and sketches of ideas that she had carried everywhere. The girl's eyes followed the movements on stage. Each performer was confident. But she noticed something subtle that others didn't. The boy juggling was skilled but seemed nervous, missing a beat occasionally. The pianist's fingers danced perfectly across the keys, but the music felt rehearsed and cold. The dancers moved in perfect synchronization, but there was a sense of routine rather than emotion. Watching them, she realized she didn't need to be flashy or loud. She didn't need props or bright costumes. What she had to offer was something deeper, something that came from her experiences, from her heart, and her understanding of the world. That thought gave her a quiet strength. As the performers continued, the room filled with applause at the end of each act. The girl clutched her notebook a little tighter. Each cheer from the audience reminded her that people loved spectacle, but she hoped they could also recognize truth and raw emotion when they saw it. She had learned over the years that real impact didn't come from appearances, but from authenticity. And she had authenticity in abundance, though no one here could guess it yet. Time moved slowly, the sounds of the hall blending into a rhythmic hum. The girl noticed the stage lights flicker slightly as the next participant prepared. The organizers checked their notes, and a few people left their seats to speak to friends, showing how little they expected from what was to come. She was scheduled toward the end, which gave her a longer wait, but also more time to watch, learn, and ready herself. She took this as an advantage, letting her mind wander and focus on the feelings she wanted to convey. Every detail of her performance had been considered, practiced in silence. refined in solitude. The audience continued their chatter, some leaning toward friends to guess what she might do. "She looks too shy to perform anything interesting," one man said, shrugging. "I bet it'll be a disaster," a woman added. The girl heard these whispers but chose to let them roll off her. She had grown used to being underestimated. In fact, she often found that when people assumed she couldn't, it made her work even harder. Not for them, but for herself. She wanted to prove something, not out of spite, but because she had something inside her that demanded expression. She thought about the countless nights spent practicing alone in her small room, where no one could watch and no one could judge. She remembered the early mornings when she woke before the sun, rehearsing quietly while the house slept. She recalled the afternoons when rejection letters piled up, each one a reminder of the world's lack of recognition, yet she continued. All those moments had prepared her for this single opportunity. And though her nerves were real, so was her resilience. She felt a quiet, simmering excitement, a readiness that contrasted with the casual indifference of the room around her. The host of the event called out names, announcing each participant. The applause came and went, and the room seemed to breathe in anticipation for the next act. Finally, the time for her turn drew nearer. She closed her notebook, placing it gently beside her, and rose from her chair. Every step toward the stage felt like a declaration. The creak of the wooden floor under her feet was a small reminder that this was real, that she was here, and that nothing could undo the years of preparation. The girl took her place off to the side of the stage, peeking at the audience. Faces turned toward her, some curious, some bored. The judges, a panel of 3, looked down at their notes, ready to check off the next participant quickly. No one seemed prepared for what was coming, and in that moment she allowed herself a brief smile, feeling the weight of expectation, or lack thereof, and recognizing the opportunity it presented. She didn't need anyone to believe in her yet. She just needed this moment to be hers. The room seemed to settle, quiet hush falling over the audience as they waited for the next performance. The girl took a slow breath, centering herself. She let the years of doubt, struggle, and perseverance fill her, transforming nerves into energy, fear into focus. She reminded herself that no matter what anyone else thought, she had something to offer that went beyond appearances and shallow judgments. She had a story, a presence, and a heart that could speak through her performance. As she stood there, waiting for the cue to step fully onto the stage, the whispers faded. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. The audience, still unaware of what was about to happen, leaned forward slightly, unconsciously sensing that this quiet figure might just carry a moment they would not forget. And though she appeared ordinary, the girl knew that she held within her a spark, a light forged from years of unseen effort, ready to ignite the room with a single performance that would leave no one unmoved. Before she stepped onto the stage, memories of her past came rushing back, vivid and unavoidable. She remembered a small room she had once lived in, filled with barely enough space for a bed and a desk. The walls had been plain, but she had covered them with scraps of paper, drawings, and clippings that reflected her dreams. No one had ever paid attention to what she was creating, and she had learned early that her work, her passions, were her own. She recalled teachers who had shrugged when she asked questions, friends who had drifted away because they didn't understand her, and family members who had suggested she focus on something practical instead of pursuing the arts. Each memory brought a mixture of sadness and strength. She had faced rejection in many forms. Auditions where she had been told she wasn't ready, chances that were given to others in moments when her efforts seemed invisible. Those experiences had shaped her, taught her resilience, and, most importantly, had built a quiet determination. She had spent years learning to move forward without applause, to keep creating even when no one was watching, and to nurture her talents in silence. This performance was not just a chance to be seen. It was a culmination of every struggle, every late night, and every sacrifice she had made. Her journey was not easy. There were times she had doubted herself, wondering if all the effort had been wasted. She had been told that talent alone would not be enough, that the world was harsh, and that only a few succeeded. There had been moments when she had considered giving up, thinking maybe it was time to choose a safer path. But she could never silence the part of her that craved expression that needed to share what was inside her. Each setback had become a lesson, each disappointment a building block, and each day alone a moment to refine her skills. By the time she reached this small town hall, she carried not only her ability, but also the wisdom of her journey. She thought about the people who had underestimated her. There had been colleagues who dismissed her ideas, neighbors who barely acknowledged her presence, and strangers who had made assumptions based on appearances alone. Each encounter had chipped away at her confidence at times, but it had also forged her focus. She had learned that people often judge quickly, and those judgments rarely reflected her true abilities. Her entire life had prepared her for moments like this, where expectation was low and the impact could be greatest. It was in this quiet underestimation that she found strength. The girl also remembered moments of kindness that had mattered deeply. There had been a mentor who had noticed her dedication and encouraged her to keep going. There had been friends who had supported her in small ways, offering encouragement when no one else did. Even in a life marked by doubt and challenge, these small gestures had reminded her that perseverance was possible. They had shown her that while recognition was not always immediate, it could come when least expected. This understanding had guided her through years of preparation and gave her courage now. She thought about her practice. It's often done in solitude. She had spent countless hours alone, rehearsing in front of mirrors, recording herself, and listening to every detail of her performance. There had been evenings when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her, but she had pressed on. Even when the only audience had been herself, she had performed with honesty and intensity. Those private moments had shaped her ability to convey emotion, to connect with unseen observers, and to turn nervous energy into something beautiful. Every note, every gesture, and every expression had been honed in these quiet, personal sessions. The girl recalled specific experiences that had tested her resolve. She remembered auditions where the judges barely glanced at her before dismissing her. She remembered classroom presentations that left her heart pounding because peers had mocked her. She remembered performing for a small community event where no one applauded, and yet she had finished every time holding her head high. These experiences had taught her more than praise ever could. They had taught her the value of persistence, the importance of authenticity, and the power of remaining true to herself despite discouragement. Every rejection had been a teacher, every doubt an opportunity to grow. Her mind wandered to the sacrifices she had made along the way. There had been jobs she had taken simply to pay bills, often leaving little time for her passion. There had been friendships that faded because her commitment to practice left little room for socializing. Family obligations had sometimes clashed with her dreams, creating tension and frustration. She had learned to navigate these challenges with patience and discipline. Balancing responsibility with the pursuit of what mattered most, it was not easy, but it had built the resilience that now carried her toward the stage. Despite the obstacles, she had moments of quiet triumph. She remembered small victories that had affirmed her path. A compliment from a respected mentor, an unexpected smile from someone who appreciated her work, the sense of accomplishment after a long practice session. These moments, though brief, had provided fuel and motivation. They reminded her that every effort, no matter how unseen, had value. They had helped her believe that one day she might step into a space where her abilities could finally be recognized and appreciated. As she waited for her turn, she reflected on the importance of authenticity. She had learned that imitation could never carry the same weight as genuine expression. Those who tried to copy others often fell flat, while those who embraced their own unique voice could resonate deeply with an audience. She had spent years cultivating her individuality, learning to trust her instincts, and understanding the depth of emotion she could convey. This performance was an opportunity to share that authenticity fully, without compromise, and she intended to do so. Her thoughts drifted to the audience she would soon face. She imagined their faces, some skeptical, some indifferent, and some genuinely curious. She knew that first impressions mattered and that she would need to capture attention immediately. But more than that, she wanted to connect with them on a human level. She wanted them to feel the truth behind her performance, to recognize the passion, effort, and life experiences that shaped her. She wanted to communicate not just skill, but heart, and she trusted that those who truly listened would understand. The The girl also considered the stakes of this moment. While the event was small and the audience modest, she knew that impact was not measured by size. Even a single person moved to tears or thought differently because of her performance would be a success. She measured her achievements not by applause or recognition, but by the sincerity and honesty of her delivery. Every expression, every movement, and every note mattered because it carried the weight of her story. She had prepared for years to seize this opportunity. She was ready. She remembered times when she had felt invisible, overlooked, or underestimated. Those feelings had been painful, but they had also been instructive. They had taught her to work diligently, to hone her craft, and to cultivate patience. She had learned to listen, observe, and adapt. She had discovered that real strength often grows in solitude, and that perseverance could lead to moments where all previous doubts were rendered irrelevant. This understanding fueled her determination as she prepared to perform. The girl took a deep breath, feeling a wave of calm wash over her. She reminded herself that she was not here to compete for validation, but to share what she had cultivated over years of quiet dedication. She allowed herself a moment to feel gratitude for the journey, for the challenges that had shaped her, and for the resilience that now carried her forward. In that quiet, reflective moment, she felt a sense of readiness, a confidence born not from arrogance, but from experience and preparation. She thought about the narrative of her life, the challenges and triumphs that had defined her. Each experience, from rejection to encouragement, had contributed to the depth of her understanding and the authenticity of her expression. She knew that her performance would not just be about technique or talent, but about conveying the essence of her journey. She intended to channel every emotion, every lesson, and every heartbeat into the moment, allowing the audience to witness not just a performance, but a piece of her life. The girl glanced around the room once more. The audience seemed preoccupied with small talk, unaware of the depth of emotion that was about to be revealed. She felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that the element of surprise could be powerful. Those who had underestimated her, those who had whispered doubts, would soon realize that true talent cannot be measured by appearances alone. She smiled softly, feeling a mix of anticipation and serenity. The stage was waiting, and she was ready. Finally, her name was called. The girl stood, feeling the weight of countless experiences guiding her steps. She moved toward the stage with purpose, each movement deliberate and controlled. As she approached, she felt a surge of energy, a readiness to transform nerves into expression. The audience, still unaware of what was to come, turned their attention. Some faces displayed mild curiosity, some skepticism, and a few genuine interest. None of them could guess the impact that would soon unfold. She stepped onto the stage, the lights casting a warm glow around her. The microphone, the open space, and the expectant audience all seemed to merge into a single point of focus. She centered herself, taking a final, steadying breath. This was more than a performance. It was a culmination of years, a testimony to persistence, and an expression of authenticity. She was ready to let her story, her emotion, and her talent speak for themselves. And in that quiet, determined moment, she understood that whatever happened next, she had already achieved something remarkable simply by arriving, prepared and unafraid. As she stepped fully onto the stage, the sound of the audience faded into the background. Her focus shifted inward to the rhythm of her heartbeat and the flow of her emotions. She had waited for this moment for so long, and now that it was here, she felt a mix of anticipation and calm. The microphone stood before her, its cold metal surface reflecting the dim stage lights. The audience watched quietly, some curious, some indifferent, and some still skeptical. None of them had any idea of the depth she carried within her. Her first movements were small, subtle, almost hesitant, but purposeful. She started with a gentle introduction, a soft, measured tone that drew attention without demanding it. The audience, unprepared for anything extraordinary, leaned forward slightly, sensing that something different was beginning. Her voice carried warmth and authenticity, each word spoken with care, each gesture deliberate. Though she appeared ordinary, There was a quiet intensity in her presence that was impossible to ignore. She began to tell her story through her performance, letting every experience, every struggle, and every triumph flow through her expression. She moved with a grace that had been cultivated through years of private practice. Her hands, once trembling with nerves, now conveyed emotion with precision. Her eyes reflected a depth of feeling that reached beyond the stage and touched the hearts of those watching. Every subtle motion was a testament to the countless hours spent. Refining her skills in solitude, the audience slowly grew silent. The murmurs and whispers that had filled the room moments ago disappeared, replaced by an attentive stillness. People could feel the energy in the room shift, though they did not yet understand why. Some leaned forward, eyes wide, as if trying to catch every nuance of her performance. Others felt a chill of anticipation, realizing that they were witnessing something rare, something genuine and deeply human. She continued, allowing the emotion she had carried for so long to pour forth. The struggles of her past, the moments of doubt, the small victories that had kept her going all were reflected in her tone, posture, and movement. She did not rely on theatrics or exaggerated gestures. Instead, she used subtlety and honesty to create a powerful impact. Her performance was not about impressing anyone with showmanship. It was about connecting, about sharing a piece of herself that had been hidden for too long. Her voice, soft at first, began to gain strength and confidence. She used pauses effectively, allowing silence to emphasize the weight of her words and actions. The audience, captivated, began to feel the story she was telling, not just as a performance, but as a lived experience. Each person in the room was drawn into her world, empathizing with the struggles, feeling the tension of uncertainty, and celebrating the quiet triumphs that had brought her here. It was as if she had invited them into her private journey, and they were honored to witness it. As she moved through her performance, subtle gestures and expressions conveyed emotion more powerfully than any words could. A slight tilt of the head, a breath held for a moment too long, a flicker of emotion in her eyes. All these small details added layers to the narrative she was creating. The audience, sensing the authenticity, responded not with applause yet, but with a hushed reverence. They were caught off guard, realizing that what they had expected to be a simple, unremarkable act had transformed into something deeply affecting. Her body language reflected confidence and vulnerability at once. She did not try to dominate the stage, but instead occupied it naturally, allowing her presence to grow organically. She let her emotions guide her movements, her tone, and her expressions, creating an atmosphere that was both intimate and powerful. The audience felt the honesty in every action, the truth in every word, and the courage behind every gesture. It was clear that this performance came from a lifetime of experience, thought, and reflection. Time seemed to slow as she continued. Each moment stretched, giving the audience the space to absorb the depth of what was unfolding. People who had been skeptical moments before found themselves leaning forward, drawn in by a force they could not explain. They began to sense the story behind the quiet figure on stage, understanding that her performance was not just talent, but a reflection of resilience, perseverance, and authenticity. Their expectations were being challenged, and they could not help but be moved. She allowed herself to feel the emotions fully as she performed. The years of struggle, the moments of doubt, the triumphs that had been unrecognized all flowed through her. She embraced the vulnerability that came with sharing such an intimate part of herself, knowing that it was this honesty that made the performance compelling. The audience responded subconsciously, their own emotions stirred by the raw human expression before them. Some faces softened, some eyes glistened, and a few people instinctively wiped away tears. Every detail had been carefully considered, yet executed with natural ease. She did not force anything. Instead, she let the performance unfold as it had been in her mind and heart for years. She allowed silence, movement, and emotion to communicate in ways that words alone could not. The audience, caught in this delicate balance, was drawn into the moment. Sensing the authenticity and dedication that underpinned every choice, there was no pretense, no desire to impress artificially, only truth. As the performance progressed, a transformation took place in the room. The atmosphere shifted from casual observation to focused engagement. People who had arrived with low expectations found themselves mesmerized, their attention fully captured. The whispers of doubt faded, replaced by a collective awareness that something extraordinary was happening. The quiet girl they had underestimated was demonstrating a command over her craft and a depth of emotion that was impossible to ignore. She introduced subtle variations in tone and movement, keeping the audience on edge, anticipating each new development. Her expressions conveyed a wide spectrum of emotions, allowing the viewers to experience the narrative in a personal and profound way. Every gesture, no matter how small, was charged with meaning. The audience began to realize that they were not merely witnessing a performance, they were experiencing a story, one that had been lived, felt, and earned. She maintained eye contact with the audience occasionally, not to seek validation, but to connect. Those fleeting moments allowed her to gauge their reactions, to sense their engagement, and to subtly adjust her delivery for maximum impact. The room was quiet, but electric, the energy building with every passing moment. People found themselves leaning in, their minds and hearts drawn to the authenticity that radiated from her presence. The performance reached a point where the intensity of her emotions became palpable. She had built a rhythm, a flow that carried the audience along with her. The subtle gestures and expressions culminated in a powerful, silent climax that left the room suspended. Breath was held collectively, the quietness heavy with anticipation. Her presence filled the space, commanding attention without the need for loudness or spectacle. It was a quiet power, one that demanded recognition through sheer authenticity. Some audience members felt a lump in their throats. Others felt their eyes sting with unshed tears. The performance resonated on a deeply personal level, evoking memories, emotions, and reflections in each individual. The girl's ability to convey her story without exaggeration or theatrics created a space where vulnerability was respected and connection was inevitable. People found themselves drawn into the narrative, empathizing with her journey and the struggles she had endured. She continued to explore the emotional depth of her performance, allowing each moment to breathe and unfold naturally. The audience remained spellbound, caught in the ebb and flow of emotion and expression. They had come expecting something simple, perhaps forgettable, but now found themselves completely immersed. Their assumptions had been challenged, and they were witnessing the profound impact that authenticity, dedication, and talent could create. The girl's focus remained unwavering. She was fully present in every moment, attuned to the subtle cues of the audience while staying true to her own expression. Her performance was a dialogue, a silent conversation that transcended words. Each gesture, movement, and glance communicated layers of meaning, and the audience responded intuitively. The room was united in attention, shared experience that bridged the gap between performer and viewer. As she approached the final moments, the girl felt a sense of completeness. She had shared everything she had intended to, conveying not only her skill, but the essence of her journey. The audience, having been carried along this emotional path, remained still, absorbing the final expressions and gestures. The impact was undeniable, a quiet yet powerful resonance that lingered in the air. People realized that they had been part of something unique, something deeply moving, and something that would stay with them long after the performance ended. She concluded with a subtle, heartfelt expression, allowing the final notes and gestures to settle naturally. The room remained silent for a moment, the audience collectively holding their breath before reality returned, and the magnitude of what they had witnessed became apparent. The quiet girl, once underestimated, had transformed the space with authenticity, depth, and unwavering focus. The audience was left stunned, the experience lingering in their minds and hearts, testament to the power of truth, dedication, and emotional resonance in performance. The room was completely silent now. Not a single whisper, not a single cough, not even the sound of a chair creaking could be heard. Everyone had been caught, fully absorbed by the performance that was unfolding before them. The quiet girl, once overlooked and underestimated, had transformed the atmosphere entirely. There was a weight to the air, a palpable intensity that drew every eye and ear toward her. She moved and spoke with a confidence that seemed impossible just moments ago. Yet it felt perfectly natural. Every gesture she made carried meaning. Her hands, once subtle, now moved with a purpose that accentuated her story. She didn't need elaborate props or flashy attire. Everything she needed was within her. The audience was no longer simply watching. They were experiencing. Some leaned forward instinctively, as if trying to catch every nuance of the emotion she conveyed. Others closed their eyes briefly, letting the feelings she expressed wash over them. Connecting with memories and emotions of their own, the silence was deeper than mere quiet. It was a shared pause, a collective suspension of disbelief, where everyone in the room seemed to recognize the significance of what they were witnessing. The girl's performance had grown beyond simple entertainment. It had become an intimate conversation between her and the audience. Each person felt the honesty, the vulnerability, and the power that came from a lifetime of perseverance. They were learning her story not through words alone, but through the rhythm of her movements, the tone of her voice, and the emotion she projected. Her voice, soft at first, had gained strength and resonance. She spoke not to impress, but to communicate, to reveal the layers of experience and emotion she carried. The audience could feel the struggles, the quiet victories, and the deep resilience behind her words. It was clear that she had lived each moment she was sharing, and that authenticity was what made the performance so compelling. The room seemed to lean into her every movement, as though drawn by an invisible thread that connected performer and observer as she continued. A few people felt tears welling in their eyes. It wasn't just her talent that moved them. It was the raw honesty, the sense of truth that resonated deeply. Some had come expecting a simple, perhaps forgettable performance, yet here they were, silently holding their breath, recognizing the incredible depth of skill and emotion in front of them. The quiet girl they had underestimated had created a space where vulnerability was respected and power was measured not in volume or spectacle, but in connection. Her movements were deliberate and flowing, guided by the rhythm of her emotions. Each gesture, each pause, each glance was carefully considered, yet carried the ease of someone completely in control. The audience could sense the years of preparation, the countless hours of practice and reflection that had led to this singular moment. They were witnessing not just a performance, but the embodiment of dedication, resilience, and authenticity. It was impossible to look away, possible not to be drawn in. She allowed herself to fully inhabit the moment, feeling every beat of her own heart and allowing it to resonate with the audience. Her performance was no longer a series of rehearsed actions. It had become a living, breathing expression of her life's experiences. She embraced the vulnerability that came with this exposure, knowing that true impact could only come from honesty. The audience, in turn, responded instinctively, their emotions mirroring hers. Their attention fixed completely on her. The intensity of her performance grew. She shifted seamlessly between subtle and dramatic movements, letting her body language convey feelings words could not capture. Her expressions changed with the nuances of her story, each one carefully calibrated to evoke empathy and connection. The audience felt the ebb and flow of emotion, their own reactions rising and falling in response. It was as if the room itself had become an extension of her performance. Participating silently, yet powerfully in the experience, people began to recognize the sheer skill involved. There was nothing flashy or overdone, yet the impact was profound. Each motion, each sound, and each pause was infused with meaning, reflecting a level of mastery that could only come from years of quiet, dedicated practice. The audience understood that this was not a performance seeking applause. It was an offering, a gift of authenticity and human experience. And they were receiving it fully, aware of the rarity and depth of what they were witnessing. The girl's eyes occasionally scanned the audience, but she did not seek validation. Instead, she used those moments to connect, to allow her energy and focus to bridge the space between her and the viewers. The audience felt this connection intuitively, sensing that she was speaking to them personally, even as she maintained a universal resonance. The silence of the room became a shared understanding, a mutual acknowledgement of the significance of the moment. As the performance reached its peak, the room seemed to hold its breath collectively. The tension and emotion were almost tangible, suspended in the space between performer and audience. Every subtle movement, every inflection of voice, every carefully placed pause contributed to a crescendo of impact. The audience felt the weight of her journey, the challenges she had overcome, and the strength she had cultivated. It was impossible to separate the performer from her story. They were intertwined in a way that was both profound and unforgettable. The girl allowed the intensity to flow naturally. Her movements fluid and expressive. She was fully present, aware of every detail, yet not constrained by conscious thought. The performance had become an extension of herself, a manifestation of her experiences and emotions. The audience was swept along, caught in the current of authenticity and skill. The quiet energy that had surrounded her initially had transformed into a powerful, immersive presence that dominated the room. Some in the audience felt tears fall, while others simply sat in stunned silence, their eyes fixed, their attention unwavering. The quiet girl, once underestimated, had commanded a space that demanded recognition not through noise or spectacle, but through the depth of her expression. Every person in the room could sense the honesty and dedication behind her performance, and it left an indelible mark. They realized that they had underestimated not only her talent, but her entire life of preparation and perseverance. She allowed herself to feel the culmination of her effort and emotion. Each year of struggle, each moment of doubt, each quiet victory, all of it was reflected in the performance. She had poured herself completely into the moment. The audience responded instinctively, their emotions entwined with hers. It was not about applause or recognition. It was about the shared experience, the mutual understanding, and the profound connection that had been forged in silence. The girl's focus remained unwavering. She guided the performance to a natural conclusion, allowing the energy and emotion to settle gently. The room remained still, as if no one dared to interrupt the delicate balance that had been created. People were aware that they had witnessed something extraordinary, something rare and deeply human. The quiet girl who had been underestimated had demonstrated that true power and impact come not from appearances, but from authenticity, skill, and dedication. As the final moments of her performance faded, the room held its breath for an instant longer. The audience absorbed the significance of what they had seen, understanding that they had been part of something remarkable. The quiet girl, once overlooked, had transformed the space with a performance that resonated deeply, leaving a lasting impression. She had proven that authenticity, perseverance, and the courage to be vulnerable could create a moment of profound connection and unforgettable impact. When she finished, the room remained still for a heartbeat longer, as if everyone was holding on to the final echo of what they had just witnessed. Then, slowly, the atmosphere shifted. The audience, once quiet and skeptical, began to react. Hands clapped softly at first, then more loudly, until the entire room was filled with applause. People rose to their feet, some cheering, some crying quietly. All of them united in recognition of the power of what they had experienced. The girl, standing on the stage, felt a wave of relief and quiet pride. She had given everything, and it had been received in the way she had hoped. She allowed herself a small smile, acknowledging the applause without arrogance. This was not about winning or proving anyone wrong. It was about sharing a piece of herself and being seen. Years of preparation, struggles, doubts, and perseverance had led to this moment, and it was complete. The audience's reaction, while gratifying, was secondary to the satisfaction of expressing her truth fully and honestly. She felt the culmination of countless experiences in this single moment, a moment that validated the journey she had undertaken alone. People began to approach her, some hesitantly, others with eagerness, offering words of admiration and gratitude. Their initial underestimation was gone, replaced by respect and awe. A few admitted quietly that they had expected very little, only to be completely surprised by the depth and authenticity of her performance. Their reactions were not just about talent, but about recognizing the courage, dedication, and vulnerability that had been poured into the moment. It was clear that this was a rare experience, one that would linger in their memories. The judges, who had initially seemed indifferent, were visibly moved. They exchanged glances, their expressions reflecting the surprise and admiration that words could not fully capture. Notes were forgotten. Critiques were set aside. What mattered was not technical assessment, but the profound impact of what they had just witnessed. The girl, once underestimated, had revealed something more important than skill alone. She had revealed herself, her life, and her resilience. And that had created an unforgettable connection. Even as the applause continued, she felt a sense of calm. The tension and nervous energy that had accompanied her onto the stage melted away, replaced by a warm satisfaction. She had faced the challenge fully and authentically. The audience had responded not just to performance, but to truth. This was the moment she'd been waiting for, and she had met it with courage and honesty. The applause was a recognition, but the deeper reward was the knowledge that she had shared her journey genuinely. Without compromise, conversations began to ripple through the audience. Some people speaking in hushed tones, others more openly. They spoke about the skill, the emotion, and the authenticity they had witnessed. Some discussed how unexpected it had been, how a quiet, seemingly ordinary girl could command such presence and impact. The room buzzed with a new energy, one that was a mixture of admiration, reflection, and inspiration. She had altered the perception of those who had underestimated her, not through confrontation, but through demonstration of her abilities and her heart. She noticed individuals who had initially whispered doubts, now looking at her with a mixture of surprise and respect. Some had come expecting nothing more than a simple performance, but now they were forced to confront the depth and power of her presence. Their previous assumptions were replaced with understanding and perhaps a hint of humility. She had not needed to announce her worth. She had shown it, letting the work speak for itself, and it had done so profoundly. The girl allowed herself to step down from the stage, feeling the steady pulse of life returning to the room around her. The audience continued to applaud, some still standing, some offering words of encouragement, others simply staring, caught in the emotional aftermath. She moved with quiet grace, absorbing the acknowledgement without letting it overwhelm her. Her satisfaction came from the authenticity of her effort, from knowing that she had fully expressed herself and connected with those who witnessed it as she made her way to a seat. A few people approached to speak, sharing how deeply they had been moved. They spoke about emotions stirred, memories recalled, and inspiration felt. Their responses were varied, personal, and heartfelt, reflecting the universal impact of what she had conveyed. It was a reminder that true expression reaches beyond performance, touching the humanity within each observer. The girl, listening to their words, felt the quiet warmth of shared recognition and understanding. The judges eventually returned to their roles, but with a newfound respect. They offered sincere praise, commenting on the precision, control, and emotional resonance of the performance. Their professional assessments, once routine, were now imbued with admiration and acknowledgement of the unique presence she had demonstrated. They recognized not only technical skill, but also the power of authenticity and emotional engagement. It was a moment of professional and personal validation, subtle yet meaningful. As the event drew to a close, the girl remained quietly reflective. The audience continued to discuss what they had seen, still processing the unexpected depth and authenticity. She understood that the performance was not an end, but a marker, a point in her journey where her dedication and perseverance were acknowledged. The applause and admiration were gratifying, but the deeper fulfillment lay in the realization that she had expressed herself fully, honestly, and without reservation. The people who had underestimated her now regarded her differently. Their assumptions, once unchallenged, had been quietly and irrevocably corrected. They had witnessed the culmination of years of unseen effort, the embodiment of resilience, and the quiet power of authenticity. The girl's impact extended beyond the performance itself. It had changed perceptions, inspired reflection, and demonstrated the value of perseverance. She had shown that being underestimated was not a limitation, but an opportunity to reveal strength and depth in unexpected ways as she prepared to leave the hall. She felt a sense of closure. The performance had accomplished what she had intended: to express herself fully, to connect with the audience, and to demonstrate the power of dedication and authenticity. She had stepped into a space where expectations were low and transformed it into a moment of profound impact. The experience reinforced her belief that true expression comes from within, and that perseverance, authenticity, and courage are the most powerful tools one can possess. She walked through the hall, receiving nods, smiles, and quiet words of praise. Each acknowledgement reinforced the significance of the moment, not in a showy way, but through genuine human connection. People who had once overlooked her now saw her differently, not merely as a performer, but as a person who had lived her experiences fully and brought them to life in a way that touched others. The impact was subtle, profound, and enduring. Outside the hall, the girl paused for a moment, feeling the cool air and the quiet settling around her. She reflected on the journey that had led to this day, on the struggles, the practice, the quiet perseverance that had gone unnoticed for so long. She realized that the performance was not just about recognition, but about affirmation of her own journey and the value of remaining true to oneself. The audience had witnessed her truth, and in doing so had acknowledged the depth of her character and dedication.